Azrael did not want to be Grand Master of the Dark Angels. Not in this way. Not at this time. He gazed across the hall, behind the shield of power protecting the central area where a circle of heretics stood. There, amidst a web of iron spines and ribbed pipes, flesh pierced in a dozen places, was Grand Master Naberius. Night Lords Cataphracti were pushing hard against the Deathwing from the sides. The tide of battle had turned against them, their odds slimming with each second. Acting Supreme Grandmaster Azrael stared at Supreme Grandmaster Naberius only to realize the worst. He was already dead. His soul was gone, ripped from his body. The life signs were merely that, the consequence of dark technologies keeping what remained of his body operational. His gaze holding nothing of the warrior that had led the chapter for so long. The perfect puppet for a trap. Azrael did not wish for this, yet it was a mercy. He activated the Vox and initiated the Terminus Protocol. Moments later, the power pack on Naberius' armor overloaded with a blast of force and heat, annihilating the techno-cultists and ending the desecration of the previous chapter master. With that action, he and the Deathwing prepared for extraction. But to become Supreme Grandmaster takes more than merely a field promotion. It is more than assuming command when there is no one else. To become the Grand Master of the Dark Angels is a dark and secretive process. It is to face trials unknown, to stare down the worst reflections of your soul, and to embrace the past and the future of the Unforgiven in its entirety. Hello and welcome one and all, my name is Azrael, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my entry surrounding Azrael, and his donning the mantle of Chapter Master of the Dark Angels. Quick notice, YouTube seems to be a bit odd these days, so every bit of your support counts. Do please like, comment or subscribe, and giving me a shout out across social media and or forums would be a great help. Until then, I'll keep ploughing through anywho. Now, steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die, and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 41st millennium. Rituals, secrets, and lies. The currency of the Dark Angels. None understand this more than those of the Inner Circle, and beyond that, the Supreme Grand Master himself. The Council had already ratified Azrael's elevation to Supreme Grand Master, temporary as it was, in order to further guide the campaign on Remiel. Yet it was not enough for Azrael. For every Supreme Grand Master must undertake the passing of the gates, the ritual of proof of commitment to the Dark Angels and to the Inner Circle, to survive tests of painful truth and undergo a spiritual epiphany. Azrael had to know he was worthy, lest he serve with anything less than the purity his new station desired. Azrael stood before the rune-marked archway, the shadows within gloomy and forbidding, deep in the catacombs beneath the Tower of Angels. He was garbed in a ceremonial white robe and black tabard. Ezekiel, chief librarian, stood with him, garbed in the blue of the librarius. Even before he entered the darkness, he saw glowing pinpricks of bright red within. His testing had begun, ere he had even started. With a moment at the end of the gloom, he read the inscription above the corridor of shadows. Walk the shadows, bring the light. Thus did he walk forward and become swallowed by the blackness. It was not long before the light returned. the ink-black dark giving way to light once more. There stood Ezekiel, before a banner depicting the angel of death bearing a red rose, the signal of sacrifice of the lion and of the emperor. Ezekiel spoke to him.
"This is the portal of penumbral sorrow. The light becomes darkness. It is the boundary between what was and what shall be. To step through is a declaration of your intent, a move from the past to the future, a remolding of the man you are into the man you must be."
Above the door, in contradiction with the previous inscription, was written, "Bring the light, cast the shadow." The play and counterplay between light and dark, truth and lies, hope and shame. To be the supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels is to forever be its guiding light, and the bearer of the burden of millennia of secrets and shame. Ezekiel pulled open the next door, and Azrael stepped through once again, Ezekiel following behind. Through the warm shadows of the corridor, they approached the next chamber. An amber glow emanated from entrances scattered throughout the room. On the floor, the winged sword of the chapter against a circle of red. Around the chamber, the watchers in the dark circled Azrael, each bearing lanterns that created more shadows than they dispelled. Behind them came his chapter brethren, cowled and robed. Their faces were not visible, yet Azrael knew them by their iconography and markings. Dagonet, the Master of Sanctity, approached Azrael, a burning censer swinging by his hands.
"One has come who would be master of all. One has come who would be servant to all."
The smoke billowed across Azrael. The watchers slid from his mind's eye, forever on the edge of notice. Samael, commander of the Raven Wing, garbed in robes of midnight black, swept forward and extended his hand. A black feather balanced in his palm.
"One has come who would seize the shadows."
Azrael tentatively reached out to take the feather, yet as he did so, the plume turned to smoke between his fingers.
"One who has come who would lead the shadows."
Ezekiel approached Azrael, no longer guiding him, but one of the many brothers within the ritual.
"One has come who would see the unseen."
As shadows rippled from his arms to his fingertips, Azrael turned his back to Ezekiel and felt the great weight and cold embrace of a terrible burden upon his shoulders as Ezekiel laid the shadows on him as a cloak.
"One has come who would guide the unseen."
Azrael blinked, and the room altered. No longer were the watchers in the dark there. His brothers were now gone, save Ezekiel. Where he had been staring at an empty wall was now an enormous archway, embossed with a roaring lion at its apex. Flanking the archway were two enormous dreadnoughts coloured in bone ivory, the Wardens in white. They were the last Guardians of the Rock. None recall their names. No books log who they were, nor how they came to be. Now, they stand as guardians to the Chamber of Passageways. One was hope, the other despair. A supreme Grand Master must dare to tread the path between them alone, should they have the strength. Ezekiel drew Azrael's attention to a watcher in the dark, bearing a scabbarded sword. Not simply any sword, a heavenfall blade, one of only a few created. This one was the Sword of Secrets, the mark of the Supreme Grand Master, and the key to the deepest secrets that lay within the depths of the rock. Azrael unsheathed the sword, unsure why he required this relic for his test, yet there must be a reason, he surmised. a why and a wherefore. He had to prove to himself and to all that he was ready for his elevation. With that in mind, he strode down the chamber of passageways. The doors parted before him. A bitter wind swept across him, and the staccato of bolter fire had him raise the sword of secrets before him. He found himself within a rhino transport, with a squad of warriors from the 3rd Company. They were in the midst of an assault on the ice fields of Solu. This was his past. This was one of his tests. He knew it. The weakness and self-doubt that lingered within him from his days as a freshly appointed sergeant. Waves of screeching missiles, sharp flashes of lasfire and bolter rounds, and firestorms of plasma, shrapnel, and promethium from the assault ground to a halt as time froze. Azrael paced through that snapshot in time, light glistening off the embers and particles of dirt that hung in the air motionless. A moment of weakness, whispered a voice that seemed to come from himself as he was back then, his old form frozen in time like the rest of his surroundings. Azrael replied that it was not weakness, merely assessment, the result of inexperience in command, taking longer to verify that a bombardment had been successful. He knew now that had he been quicker, Brother Casper may have lived, that he would have advanced in time to see and destroy the walker that claimed the first life under his command. Yet, he continued. He had reminisced over this moment for centuries, the nagging question of, what if? Yet it would not do to dwell on the past. Casper had died as a result of Azrael's hesitation. Yet in the delay to call the apothecary to extract Casper's gene seed, he may have saved more lives by having the apothecary within his vicinity. Surety in his mistakes, vindication in his admittance. And then the scene changed once more. Further back this time, bounding from the constraints of a drop pod, bolter in hand, his first engagement as a full battle brother. He followed the simulacra of his young self across the scorched earth of Athenia 5. He witnessed his discipline, his marksmanship, the fresh vigor and determination of a young warrior with a need to prove himself. There, as he witnessed the rippling banner of Master Tidroth amongst the fury of the greenskins, time stopped once more. Again, the voice called to him, criticizing his ambition, that what he masked as aspirations of duty were merely the panoply of ambition. Azrael responded,
It is only the beginning of a new battle. Just like this, becoming Supreme Grand Master does not crown my achievements. It redefines them. What came before is done, part of the journey that brought me here. It means nothing to my future conduct. The war before me is the one I must win.
The scene continued to play out before him until the landscape changed once more. He found himself knee-deep in the snows, a desolate valley, absent of flora, only the shearing wind racing over the snowdrifts. On the crest of one side, a group of primitive warriors descended. Barbarians, garbed in armor of leather, wood, and bone, bearing banners that were little more than rags. From the other side approached a similar group, blood-stained and battle-ready for a brutal engagement. Azrael did not recall this. He was never here. This was not his memory, until a voice on the wind whispered, "You have been persuaded to forget." Behind the two groups came another, smaller gaggle of primitives on either side. Youths, barely 12 or 13 years old, shorter, less experienced perhaps, yet no less ruthless and determined. Azrael saw himself as a child, before his ascension to the Emperor's Angels, before his transhuman physique and indoctrination, a wiry, hard-eyed young boy, bearing a staff of wood edged with bone shards. As one, the warbands charged at each other in a brutal display of violence, the kind that has haunted humanity ever since we discovered the difference between a tribal us and them. Yet Azrael only had eyes for his younger self. What happened here? Why was he brought back to this forgotten memory? If each moment he visited contained a time of transition within him, what would he witness now? The young Azrael charged at a girl of similar age. He lashed out with his bone club, missing, and received a punch in the jaw for his efforts. She was agile, faster than him. He was beaten back. She stabbed Azrael through the leg. He defended himself against a flurry of blows that would have killed him, before he tripped on something in the snow. The girl capitalized on his weakness and she clubbed him about his mouth with her weapon. He flailed on the ground, an easy kill for the approaching girl, until she toppled over. She had been struck in the temple by a stone launched from another clan member. Young Azrael got to his feet and stood over the fallen girl. He poised himself, ready to smash in the head of the defenseless foe, and time stood still once more. Azrael spoke in horror as the voice on the wind replied back to him.
No, the victory is yours. There's no honor in her death.
What is honor?
Avoiding needless slaughter.
It is a weakness. It is indulgent mercy cloaked in ritual.
It is a code. The reason we fight. If not for honor, we are simply killers. Honor shapes our cause.
Honor is false. Victory is all. As he spoke, the snow fell harder, more forcefully. The image of the scene began to fade, of young Azrael poised to take the life of a defenseless enemy.
Did I kill her? I do not remember. Show me!
The scene changed once more. Now, no longer a memory. He was back within the catacombs beneath the Rock of Eternity, trapped within an oubliette, glowing with yellow and orange candlelight. A circular chamber of stone with neither entrance nor exit. Within the sconces of the walls stood the Watchers in the dark, their eyes of red light staring at him, watching. He understood. Each instance of memory a weakness. Hesitation, arrogance, mercy. Moments that could cost lives, could cost victory in the wrong instant. Yet the Watchers did not seem to judge, merely to witness. They did not choose these memories, these instances. Azrael's spirit did it himself. He availed to approach one of the Watchers, yet with each step the chamber altered. They remained forever out of reach, not speaking, merely watching. He examined the chamber, sought an exit in the walls, a handhold with which to climb, a method of escape, yet there seemed to be nothing. Frustration began to take hold when he realized that this, too, may be a test, one of patience. With that, he settled in the center of the oubliette and began to wait. Time passed. As it did so, his mind began to wander, to contemplate the reason for this. Perhaps he had failed the test. This could simply be the fate for one who was unworthy of becoming Supreme Grand Master. Or it could be one of madness. Or maybe one of self-sacrifice. Perhaps by ending his own life, could he salvage some respect and open the position of Supreme Grandmaster to another more worthy? Or was it a riddle? Or was that merely his pride talking? Another flaw? He continued to sit. Time unknown passed through the chamber, and he came to his realization. He spoke once more.
My doubts. They are the lingering threads of my past life. They are the worst parts of me given form. The doubts that I have accrued over the centuries. I understand. But the answers I gave you were not justifications. They were the truth. We all have doubts, and if you are a leader, it is not that you have them, but how you deal with them. My doubts are what keep me true to the cause. I question my motives. I examine my deeds. I keep my doubts close, for they are the guard against complacency. The sentry I place to ward away arrogant certainty.
The watcher in the dark that Azrael had been talking to looked up at him, and the bright coals of his eyes made Azrael's head spin. Faster and faster until he lost balance and fell into the next trial. He awoke in a chamber 12 meters across. Upon the walls hung 12 tapestries, each depicting the Angel of Death. A chorus of voices boomed from each direction. "Whom do you serve?" Azrael sought for the origin of the voice. He declared that he was a space marine, that he knew no fear. They could not intimidate him. They repeated their question. "Whom do you serve?" As he raised his blade and blocked a blow from behind him. There rippled an angel of death, garbed in a hooded green robe, wielding an ornate sword, and white wings stretched behind it. It repeated the question as it launched a flurry of attacks at Azrael. He defended, muscles burning, aches and injuries throbbing in pain, as he replied that he served the Emperor. The Angel of Death was joined by a second one now as they worked in tandem to attack Azrael. His strikes met air beneath the robes of the apparitions as they repeated their question. "Whom do you serve?" He responded that the Space Marines serve mankind. The angels merely redoubled their efforts of murder. Where their blades connected, an agonizing numbness spread. The cold, unfeeling threatened to loosen his grip upon his blade. Another Angel of Death manifested in the chamber, sword at the ready. "Whom do you serve?" They demanded as one as they rushed to surround him. Azrael stated that he served the Imperium as he bore the brunt of a fresh wave of assaults and numbing strikes. A fourth angel entered the fray behind him. He threw himself through one of the angels to avoid the attack, and turned to keep the stone walls at his back. He raised his sword as one of the angels moved to strike him, and their swords locked together. "Whom do you serve?" They repeated as he gazed into the depths of the shadows within the hooded angel's visage.
"The Dark Angels! I serve the Dark Angels!"
As quickly as they had manifested, the Angels of Death retreated and took their places back within their tapestries. Yet one thing had changed. Now, each and every Angel of Death held their swords in a salute to him. There was an alcove in the chamber, something that had not been there before. He was sure he would have noticed such a thing. He approached the indent in the stone walls. Could it be a door of some sort? Yet as he approached, he saw nothing but bare plaster. A voice spoke behind him, and he turned around only to see himself. A perfect doppelganger. Each line, scar and worry bared for him to see, yet it was merely a projection, a representation. There, it began to question him, Azrael to Azrael. A moment to face the truth and doubts about his ascension to Supreme Grand Master. The truth of this entire test, that it was never for the Watchers in the Dark to test him, but rather that this entire process was a method to test himself. What is it to be Supreme Grand Master? Asked the projection. He spoke of the initial reality, that it was to be the Lord of the Tower of Angels, the Master of the Unforgiven, the Commander of 1,000 Space Marines. His doppelganger asked him what he would do with the power at his command. Azrael replied that he would defend the realms of the Emperor. His doppelganger was dismissive, and continued to ask what Azrael's greatest power was. Azrael once again limited himself to the immediate, that with his command he could destroy worlds and star systems by his whim. His doppel was unamused. What could he hope to achieve as Supreme Grand Master? Azrael took a few moments to consider his answer. To be interrogated by oneself did not allow room for obfuscation or concealment. Azrael responded that he did not seek this honor, but rather it was a burden that he bore at the request of the Inner Circle, that the hunt was the greatest mission of the Dark Angels, that his greatest power was to unite the Unforgiven in common cause. And yet, he also bore the power to unravel the Imperium itself with revelation and truth. Secrets and lies are the unfortunate weapons he could bring to bear within his armory, as effective as bolt guns and chain swords. He declared there, before himself and before the unseen eyes that watched him, that as Supreme Grand Master he would end the hunt, that the chapter's honor would be restored beneath his guidance, that he would bend all his ken and skill to prevent succumbing to the treacheries of the past and lead the Dark Angels into redemption entire. The doppelganger began to change before his eyes. It became a shadow, which then split, and split again until a dozen shadows stared back at him. They finally took form once more, and he saw 12 members of the Inner Circle staring back at him. Hoods covered faces, sleeves covered hands. They circled him. One by one, they bent the knee to him, showing obeisance to their new commander. Azrael had passed the test. He had fought himself, his doubts, his weaknesses, and become stronger for it. In spirit, will, and determination had he become someone, something new. A fortitude of assurance and purity that he would be required to draw on in all the coming years. When he entered, he had been acting Supreme Grand Master, a formidable warrior and leader of men. Yet now he was, in truth, Supreme Grand Master, Lord of the Dark Angels, Commander of the Unforgiven. His word was their law, his oath their honor. His brothers were now his servants, as much as he was a servant of the chapter. As the Inner Circle left the chamber, gone to resume their duties, Azrael was left alone. Yet not quite alone. In the corner of the gloom, hidden in the shadows, he saw the outline of a small, solitary figure. Red eyes peered out from the darkness and gleamed for a moment. Azrael felt a measure of contentment ripple through his body, and then the figure and the sensation were gone. Azrael has led the Dark Angels in the most impossible of situations, and through the era Indomitus. Yet here is where I love him the most. this moment, this test. Because despite being a transhuman warrior, forged and formed for battle in the most egregious of circumstances, he is reminded of one thing. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. And it is through recognition and acceptance that we allow those flaws to heal and learn to cope with what holds us back. But what do you think? Is Azrael your favorite chapter master? Who should we cover next? And how does he truly feel with the return of the lion? Do comment down below your thoughts, and with that I hope you enjoyed this entry, and some escapism from reality for however short a period of time. So I'll see you on the next one, or feel free to take a look at some of the other videos on the channel. Until next time.